Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 101, the very first episode, since our rebrand. So we rebranded to the Veterinary Behavior Chat podcast last week in episode 100, and I'm so honored for this inaugural episode to be joined by the lovely Bobbie Bhambree, who is an incredible dog trainer and behaviorist. I'm going to let her introduce herself in a second, but we've got a real treat ahead because we're going to be talking all things resilience, which is such a buzzword, I think. And in fact, Bobbie and I met in person just a couple of months ago at a conference that was all about resilience. So that's where we decided to record this episode and chat a bit more. So welcome, Bobbie. Lovely to have you here.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. And we met. It was amazing, right? So I'm in the UK, but I'm from America. I live in New Jersey on the East Coast. You're in Abu Dhabi, and here we are at a UK conference. I'm like, this is just amazing.
I know, it's such a small world, big world, small world. It's so cool. So tell us a little bit about you, everything we need to know that brought you to this point.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I have been working in the dog training industry for nearly 25 years. I started out as a dog trainer, even like a dog walker. And about, I'd say like 15 years ago, I started moving more towards behavior work. And then about 7 years ago, I went primarily behavior. I worked for a veterinary behavior practice. I learned so much about medication and how medication can support behavior modification, behavior like management accommodations. And I learned so much more about the nuances of the nervous system, internal like processes, beyond external factors like environmental factors. I would always look at, before I started working at the veterinary behavior practice, I would look at, what is the function of the behavior? What's motivating the dog to behave in that particular way? And it was at this practice, I started working with Dr. Kathy Murphy, who's been a friend of mine for about 15 years now. And she started getting more into the dog behavior world, the veterinary behavior world. She's a veterinarian and a neuroscientist, but at the time was in academia. And I started to learn so much more about neuroscience and internal processes and how all of those can factor into a dog's behavior and how they process the environment, thereby influencing their behavior. And it's just, it like suddenly the whole world made sense to me. I saw it as like seeing the Matrix, and suddenly you can't see it anymore. And things that when we really started to look at the nervous system and how the nervous system can impact the welfare, beyond genetics, right? Like I always said, oh yeah, genetics is part of the conversation. This is like an active, sort of living, breathing animal in and of itself, for a lack of a better way of saying it. The nervous system is, alive, obviously, but also constantly changing because of neuroplasticity. And like, it just made everything feel more accessible as a behavior consultant, understandable. Like I just had a level of relief. Like I'm not a terrible dog trainer if I can't fix this thing for the client or what have you. And because of the complexities of, what's happening underneath the skin, so to speak, it just opens up your toolbox in a whole other way, making things more workable. And that's where the resilience conversation really came into play, is because we were looking at, well, this is across the board. We started to really explore it heavily in 2020, like during COVID, because we were all so stressed. And your shutdown, I don't know how long the shutdown lasted in Abu Dhabi, but I know the UK was like a year almost. It was many months. In America, 3 months we had a shutdown. for the pandemic. Different countries were dealing with it in different ways. And so it was during that time that I was like actively applying these concepts to my own nervous system myself.
Yeah.
And now I live that way. And so I've raised my younger dogs that way, who are now 5.5 and 2.5.
Yeah. I mean, and you're absolutely right. It is like a different world opening up. And I think being able to take behavior that deep is something quite new. I think, when you look back on sort of perhaps across the last couple of decades, the superficiality with which we've looked at behavior and shut down behavior, and I think the level of understanding that we're starting to get now, I think there's still so much more to explore, but at least opening our minds to having that conversation about physiology and the nervous system and actually the brain processes, and, how we can build those into not just the treatment, but also the prevention, right? I think that's something where I really enjoyed the conference that we met at, because of this idea that, well, if we can create a state of resilience, we might be able to prevent some things from even getting as far as they would. So, yeah, I just love everything you've just said. And it's absolutely brilliant to hear that we're starting to think in that way a lot more.
Yeah, and it was amazing to see that there was an entire conference dedicated to this. Right? Like, this conversation. And I think, Kathy and I started having this conversation, like I said, in 2020 in a more active way, kind of like, not 2020, because she was busy trying to find a vaccine when in the lab she was working with. But in 2021, we started to have these conversations to really explore how resilience works. But she and I have been having conversations that led to that point where before we were ready to like, hey, let's do something with this, just with ourselves, our own dogs over the years, and like exploring why working with these. I had a dog that we both had rescues or have rescues. She has a Rottweiler named Nancy that's now, I think, maybe 11 or 10. And then I have a 13-year-old Jack Russell Yorkie named Marvel. And we were like, everything that we thought we knew is not working with these dogs. Like, what is happening? We're doing everything that we've been taught to do and known to do. And so it really opened up our eyes to like, hey, maybe we should look at things a little differently. Maybe we should try, how do we apply the exercises while taking into consideration that, like Marvel, I would often say, he doesn't have enough bandwidth to deal with this, is how it occurred. Like, he was great, and then he'd hit a limit. And basically it was his nervous system. In retrospect, I can see that his nervous system was stressed to the point it wasn't able to cope anymore.
Yeah.
And for her dog had a lot of trauma before she got her. Mine, as far as I understand, did not, but I got him, we both got him young. Mine was 5.5 months old. I think hers was like maybe 10 months old, Nancy. And then, but mine came from a family, and her Nancy was like a street dog found in Romania and brought in by a rescue. And her, all the tools that we currently had, and even myself, because she'd call me and be like, I don't know what I'm to do with this dog.
Yeah.
She was, her in fight or flight mode was so exacerbated. Like, if she felt you brush your hand against her fur, she would just, like, the cats when they're terrified, just like fly into the air. Like, that's what she would do, and just bounce off the walls in her kitchen, because her flight response was so extreme. And so a lot of it is like, again, in retrospect, was understanding, like, rewiring the nervous system, and the fact that you can actually do that and take the time to support the animal, and ourselves, humans as well, can change things over time. And what it does is, this is the beautiful thing about resilience conditioning, is you are preventing, you're minimizing illness, disease, injury because of inflammation. It's all inflammation, right? Or chronic stress leading to inflammation. You're just building the ability to deal with stressors more readily, more easily. You're building the ability to have emotional regulation, which is huge. And, you know, we're talking about dogs, but this is applicable to humans. This is like what, you know, my husband and I like consciously live this way, especially since I've been sharing this work with him for so many years. And he also deals with, like, he had many years of chronic stress in his 20s, late teens, early 20s because of life events. And then in his 30s, his mom had Alzheimer's and was declining, and he and I were caregivers for her in addition to the rest of the family. And like, that's chronic stress right there, right? So, like, that level of stress. And so some people, like my husband, it really shows up in the nervous system with inflammation. And so he's constantly, like, he's been working through that for the last, like, I'd say 5 or 6 years. He's 45 now, just like and that's what our dogs are dealing with. And I also work a lot with, I used to do a lot of shelter work. Now I do consulting or more about education for shelters. But I used to be in the shelter of ASPCA. You know, I worked in like local rescues and shelters, and those animals are under constant stress. They have to be vigilant. They're in a shelter. It's for survival. I work with a lot of dogs in dog sports. So we're bringing these dogs. Also, most of them are bred to do these things, these sports. Some might not be, but are brought into the sports because their guardian loves the sport or is exploring things to do with their dogs. And their dog might say, hey, this is dock diving. This is so much fun, right? Like, they all of a sudden discover this new game that they love. But we're bringing our dogs, like, from our couches, from our beds, from our houses into these stressful environments, even if it's fun, right? Because a competition, a trial, we're asking them to do hard things. And then also where I saw resilience conditioning really at play, or the need of it to be there, is working with dogs in urban environments. That's huge, right? You cannot... In all three of those examples, and that's where most of my work started, like urban environments, dog sports, and then shelter work. In all three examples, you know, you can't turn down the dial of the environment.
Right.
You can't make the environment less. That's like almost impossible. And so a lot of times, when I started to understand, it's more than just a trigger. It's more than just, oh, the dog seeing another dog is a problem, like in the city, for example. It's everything their nervous system is taking in. And now on top of it, they also have a discomfort being near dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's multi-layered, isn't it? Multifactorial, so many layers of the onion. So let's talk a little bit about the framework and the conditioning. But before we dive into that, and this was actually also really interesting to me when we were at the conference, it felt like everybody's definition of resilience was slightly different, or, you know, perhaps it was even quite difficult to give an actual definition of resilience. What do you think your sort of definition of resilience would be?
Yeah, there's we have sort of a 3-layered definition, I'd say. So it's or 2 basic points. It's the ability to bounce back from stressors, and stressors could be, it doesn't have to be a trigger, because when we're defining stress, it's less about emotion and more about the activation of the nervous system. And I'll get into that in a little bit. And it's the ability to resist the negative impacts of that activation of the nervous system, especially if it's like chronic or mid-range activation, like happening. So the activation of the nervous system is basically the nervous system preparing for an event to protect the individual in some way, or to prepare the individual in some way. So it's like, you know, to some extent, my nervous system had to activate to be ready for this call. I am not a morning person, even though it's 9 a.m. and people are like, oh, 9 a.m. is not morning on the East Coast, but it's like, for me, it is. And so my nervous system really had to activate, perhaps than someone else at this hour. Plus, this is a podcast, right? So like, I have to be on in a certain sense. And then there's the activation of the nervous system that happened when my husband and I were supporting his family and taking care of his mother. And we were living in the house. So like, that was like chronic stress. Like that was,
Oh, yeah.
we're elevated for a period of time. And then what that can result in is, like, at one point his back went out for a month. Like it, I was emotionally and mentally stressed. We were arguing all the time. We were like, and then I happened to get a terrier. So my terrier was like yelling all the time because the household was really stressed. And then, I remember when we moved out, she went to a nursing home, but when we moved out, it was like a year of just like breathing and like our bodies sort of deflating from that experience. Right. So there's that. And then there's like, then there's what comes when you do the work for your body and your brain is the ability to resist the negative impacts of stressors. So like nowadays when I'm, like I don't get stressed very often, where I get like an emotional upset or panic or big feelings that might associate with that, because I've done so much work to support my nervous system in dealing with stress, recovering from stress. I live a lifestyle intentionally to support my nervous system. Think about like going to the gym to work out, to build your muscles, but you're also think of this as like the nervous system gym. Like I do a lot of decompression for my nervous system, and there's it's all like sleep, healthy sleep, walks in nature or being in nature in some way, some creative outlet, right? Community, like all of these things are ways, like how you eat, all of these things support the nervous system. Like these are things that might make sense to you, but you can actually intentionally put them in place, like in your life as like a routine, a lifestyle, a schedule. If I know that I've got, when I worked at the veterinary behavior practice, like it was a much faster pace of things, and I was more stressed, and we were growing really fast. So I was constantly stressed, like my body, even though I was excited and like, this is great. And we're doing great things in the world. And I but I would get like neck pains and like back pains and twinges. So I started to do more of, okay, like I'm going to work out and do I'm going to move at certain points of the day to like support my nervous system in coming down. It's all different. It's different for dogs, activities, what we do for them versus humans. And that's a lot of, like if I go to an agility trial for the weekend, for example, on Mondays, we're taking a walk in the woods. Like that's just how it's going to go. And it's not about the exercise, although the collies will run around. It's about the sniffing, the movement, like being in nature, things like that.
Yeah. I love that. It's that mental decompression piece, isn't it? Which is so important for our dogs, just as it is for us as well. So tell me more about your framework. So you guys obviously started chatting 2021. It started to become obvious that this was something that the world needed, both the dog world and the human world as well. And how did you guys kind of come up with the framework, or what are all the components of the framework that you've built?
Yeah, so we had a framework that we were using that we call the Resilience Rainbow when we were at the company Behavior Vets. And that was, if people are interested, there's an article that we wrote for the publication for IAABC. And so I guess we'll put it in the show notes, right?
We'll put it in the show notes.
So the science is still the same and the concepts are similar, but we've updated it since then, and we're calling it ReFraming Resilience, because we've learned so much from the community and putting these, at the time we were calling them domains, but now we're calling them elements, like putting these elements into practice, implementing them into behavior modification programs, and learning so much about how to better support the client. So there are 6 elements and then 1 foundational element. So we realize like you can't do anything if the mental and physical well-being piece is not put into place like first. And when you're doing behavior work, this is beyond like just, training your puppy or training your dog, although it's included, right? If the puppy has like diarrhea, they're not feeling well, you're not going to train them. They're not going to be in the best state of learning. But doing behavior work, so much about the mental and physical well-being of the dog had to be addressed. Like, so many dogs are in pain.
Right.
So many dogs are dealing with varying degrees of like emotional and mental health issues, like anxiety, things like that, panic, phobia, impulsivity, right? Hypersensitivity, hyperactivity. Like, there's so much of that is happening. GI issues, skin issues. Like, we're not building resilience if those are not being addressed first. And so we just, we've made that our foundation. And then from there, we have the 6 elements. So, and they're not like, one is not more important than the other. It's really happening symbiotically. Like, it's just, but I'll just say them in order as they come to my brain. So mental and physical well-being is the foundation. And then we have decompression, agency, social support, predictability, and what is the last one? It's going out of my head. I'll bring it up. I'm totally forgetting it. Hold on a sec. It'll come to me. What did I say? I said decompression, agency. See, it's been a while since I've done a presentation on it. Social support, predictability, and I'll have to look it up. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
I'll look it up right now. That's too funny. This is what happens when you're perimenopausal and your brain is like.
Oh yeah, I know. Tell me about it. But coming back to that foundational piece that you mentioned, though, I mean, you're absolutely right. Without addressing those pieces first, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's literally no point in trying to build the resilience unless you have that taken care of. That makes total sense to me. And that's literally so much of what I do, I think, is actually putting the foundational pieces in place before we can then even create an animal that is coping and able to coexist with their environment in harmony.
Mm-hmm. It's completing the stress cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's decompression, safety and security, completing the stress cycle, predictability, social support, and agency. And those are, think of them like elements or concepts. And within those elements, there are so many training exercises and activities, enrichment opportunities, accommodations management that you can put into place to support the animal that can fall under one or more of those elements. A lot of people out there, a lot of wonderful behavior consultants and trainers have created a variety of games, or like I said, exercises, techniques that already exist that, we could just pull from the shelf and say, hey, let's put this into play for the dog. So our work is really about how to make it a lifestyle and how to choose appropriate exercises based on environment, the guardian's capacity, where is the dog emotionally, mentally, physically, there's a lot of variables at play that help us decide. And then also, certain elements might be more important to focus on or more valuable to focus on at the beginning of working with a client versus, one. So maybe other than mental and physical well-being, maybe we're looking at like, okay, well, how can we provide safety and security first?
Right.
Like, that's the case for a lot of shelter dogs, right?
Yeah.
Before we look at predictability kind of thing. So it's, how to apply it, how to support the animal, what are the needs in that at that time when you start working with that dog.
Yeah. And so how many of the elements, so on top of the foundational element, how many do you normally find that caregivers are able to cope with? Does it vary from caregiver to caregiver? Or obviously we're prioritizing, as you just mentioned, but I would imagine if you kind of give all 7 to them to do, that might be a bit overwhelming. So how do you kind of make the choice in terms of number and what caregivers are able to take on?
So more often than not, depending on the caregiver, I often don't even have the conversation of the framework. The framework is more for me or my fellow professionals to say, like, this is how I'm going to come into creating a training plan for this client. What I typically will say, so for example, I'm working with a particular client right now that lives in an urban area, but they're no longer in an apartment, they're in a house, but the houses are very close together with like small gardens or backyards. And so it feels still very like population dense. Mm-hmm. And this particular pit bull they've been working with her for years with wonderful, very, very savvy behavior consultants and trainers. And they happened to hear, I think, a webinar I did for someone. And they thought, well, that's different. I want to look into like, how can I, like, they're doing all the work on the outside, like considering the environment, doing a lot of like, associating other dogs and people with treats. And, they've done all the work. The dog is already on medication. They said, what can we do better? What can we do more for her? Especially since unfortunately, when they bought the house, they didn't realize that the neighbors next door had dogs that always stayed outside and barked. So they couldn't even use the backyard.
Oh no.
For her poor dog, yeah. And even moving out of the dense city environment, she was still, after so many years, I think, of living in that environment, just her body is wired to be like hypervigilant.
Yeah.
So you've got this like 5-year-old dog that just doesn't sniff on walks. She's constantly looking around. When she is apparently perhaps triggered or stressed, she pulls like a sled dog moving down the street. It's right. Just, she's not relaxed. She's not, and that's concerning part for the guardians. They're like, she's not happy. Like, they don't like seeing it. They love their dog. And right. Then from our perspective, we know that like that can lead to like illness, injury, like earlier in life, if that's how the dog is living all the time. It's just not healthy. And she's on meds. Like, she has the support. She improved on the medication, but we're still seeing this. So, the first thing that I saw, I said, okay, well, she clearly feels very safe and secure in her home. Like, home feels right. Good. Mental and physical well-being already being supported. She's on medication. She's had, no injuries, no pain. She's cleared. So what can we do first? And I said, well, she's never been off a leash, because she's always lived in an urban area, and she can't hang out in her own little backyard. Even though it's small, it still could be off-leash experience. And we need her to decompress. She's not decompressing, because she's only ever going on leash walks. So right. Part of their assignment is at least once a week, if not more, is they go to a sniff spot, and she's off leash. And they've just noticed like such a massive difference from doing that one thing,
wow.
a couple times a week. They make it a point. And to see her in that way of like, she's just moving freely, agency, like moving freely in the sniff spot, running, sniffing. They don't ever see her sniffing. She's sniffing. She's laying in the grass. She's playing ball. She just looks like her whole body looks loose at the sniff spot versus at when she walks around the neighborhood. And what that does, if you keep doing it over time, is it rewires the body. So like, that is her recovery. Like, even if it's happening only once or twice a week, it's still an opportunity for her nervous system to practice recovery. And they just go for the hour, and then they come home, and and they're tracking, what is she like that day? What is she like the day after, the day after that? And when do we seem to kind of lose that looseness a little bit, right? Somewhere along the way. And we're doing other things as well, but this has just been like, I think the biggest impact is just doing that. So right away I thought, so when I said this to them, I didn't say like, these are the 6 elements and this is what we're going to do, and introduce them to like the whole logo and everything, the model. I just said, okay, so we need to support her body in decompressing, and this is what it looks like. And we need to give her the ability to move freely, because she's never off leash. She has to experience this kind of agency. And I explained what agency means, but in this, it's not about like, oh, I have freedom. It's some sort of control in the environment, control over your choices and how you want to move. And I talked about the power of movement for the body and the brain. And so that's what I would talk about. But in my mind, I'm thinking about the elements and how to break it down for them.
Yeah. So one of the things I absolutely love as I'm listening to you, and I use a lot of these techniques as well, is how simple they are, right? How little effort they require from the caregiver, in terms of, in inverted commas, just driving to a sniff spot and allowing her to move off leash. There's no, I guess, training if you're thinking about sort of operant behaviors involved. But do you find that that can sometimes be a difficult concept for caregivers to get their minds around? So I so often experience it that, I see a client and I recommend a treatment plan, and part of that treatment plan might be exactly those things: improving sleep, getting their kind of mental and physical health taken care of, introducing some decompression. And they're almost a little bit disappointed that I haven't given them more to do. And I'm sure you experience the same thing. How do you kind of chat around that? Or how do you kind of onboard caregivers to that way of thinking about things?
So it's a very different experience right now versus even just a few years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago. So right now, if I work with a client, I'm very lucky at this point that they're coming to me referred by somebody, or they're coming to me because they just know my work. And so they're already bought in. So I'm very lucky. But before, what I would do is I would talk about, well, I do give them things to do, right? So I would say, okay, we're going to work on like relaxation. This is what it looks like. This is the point of it. And then at some point, if they're very sort of task oriented, like I need to do stuff, and I don't necessarily start with, this is decompression, right? I'll just say, we have to do this as a foundational exercise because this is going to reset the nervous system to better support all the other things. And then I will give them like the pattern games that we like to teach for the predictability element. So I will give them those games to do because they can practice them in their home and it feels like they're doing something with their dog, right? And I explain to them, these games are going to help the dog's brain process what's going on in the environment without feeling like they have no control in the environment. And the games it'll have them, the reason we like these pattern games is that it has them moving through the space in such a way that it feels pattern-like, and the brain wants patterns. The brain is constantly looking for patterns. And when it does that, it actually helps ease the brain and body. And if it eases the brain and body, then we have an easier time. The dog has an easier time learning new strategies to deal with what's going on around them. So if they're like, I need to do stuff, then a lot of times I'll especially early on, is I would do like that kind of thing. Or I would even throw in like, let's do some exercises that teaches them like get out of dodge exercises.
Right.
So that's what I'm focused. And then like, that's what you're doing for the next week in the house only. And so then they're doing stuff, but actually it's games for the dogs. It feels like tricks, right?
Yeah.
And then each week I'm looking at, is the dog ready to take this into a new environment? Like, is the dog ready to take this into the front yard? Or if in an apartment building, in the hallway?
Right.
Is the dog ready to do this if they're in an apartment building, like in the lobby, or if we open the windows of, the apartment and now they're hearing all that urban noise? Or if they're living in a house, like we do it in the backyard, we do it in the front yard, we go to a farmer's market. So they're seeing the progression like that, in that way, while doing something at the same time.
Yeah, no, I love that. Just reframing it for the clients as well, so that they actually feel like they're doing something. I just find that sometimes that can be the hardest thing, I think, especially those clients that are very hands-on and very bought into their dog's progress, and they want to do something to kind of aid them along the way. And I really love, the way that you kind of talk about that and the way you sort of frame those things.
Thanks.
So, looking back on since when you started, what do you think has been like the single biggest thing that's made the biggest difference? Or is there even one? Is it a combination of things?
God, it's like every few years, I think I learned something that was mind-blowing that just changed everything for me. Yeah, and so the most recent one is really understanding the neuroscience. And it like there were definitely times in my behavior work over the years where I would get a case and I'm like, I have no idea what to do here, or I have no idea how to, or I don't know how this is going to go. And after learning about the neuroscience, and it's always, the other thing about science is it's always advancing, always change. Technology is improving everything. What blew my mind from working with Kathy is like mathematicians, and engineers work very closely with scientists in labs now because of technology and like everything, like computer systems, everything that has to be done nowadays. But it also opened up, it seems like because of this resilience frame, like the reframing resilience model, I have never, since then, I have not felt like I can't help with someone. Now, that doesn't mean the issue would be resolved, but we could see improvement through the work, right? It's still, there's a lot of variables at play. Environment often plays a factor. Like sometimes it's going to get as good as it's going to get, and I'll have that realistic conversation, or the household isn't the right household for the dog, or vice versa. The dog's not the right for that family. But I haven't felt that like pit in my stomach of like, I don't know what to do here. I'm, even like cases like separation anxiety, you can do so much work. So you can support the dog so much in building that resilience while also working the separation anxiety, right? It's just like, it's incredible what the body and brain can do when they are supported in this way.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And I agree. I think when I started in sort of getting more into the behavior work, which wasn't actually that long ago, considering I've been a vet for over 25 years, I started my residency only 6 years ago. So
no way.
It's definitely been like in the latter part of my career for sure. And I totally had to even like change my way of thinking around things, in that, we're always going back to the body. We're always going back to the brain. We're looking for the answers there. We're not spinning the stories around the behavior, because we as humans are so good at that, of trying to add a human context to a behavior. But actually, no, we need to go back to the body, and we need to go back to the brain. And that was a game changer for me as well. So I had a similar experience to you, being like, oh, hey, wait, it's all about the nervous system and the brain. It's got nothing to do with the stories.
No, it has nothing to do with the stories. And, environment. And if I have a Croatian sheepdog border collie, like 50-50, literally, with, I got from a breeder from Croatia, specifically to do agility, a dog sport. And, Croatian sheepdogs are very, very environmentally sensitive. They're just bred to be that way. And, in Croatia, I would imagine most live on farms, or most live, like he was in a rural area, like his mom, the litter, like the breeder, all the videos were just like, walking through the countryside and hanging out. And it was so cute seeing all these little black puppies like running around. And he, and I live in a residential neighborhood, like, we have decent sized backyards. But I'm in like a more populated space, and I want to do agility with this dog. That's why I got him, right? So I'm bringing him into like highly arousing situations. And I truly believe, like in my bones, that if I didn't understand what I know now, right, I would not have been able to raise him to be such like a level-headed dog. Like he is just an incredibly resilient dog, and has shown me, I truly think that if I didn't do this work, he would either be like one of these dogs that's like really careful, and like worried out there, or he would have bitten me, because he'd been like, hey, no patience for you. Which a lot of, I've seen a lot of Croatian sheepdogs be that way with their handlers, because they're just like, they easily get aroused and frustrated. And he has just been an incredible, and it's not just the training. I know I'm a good trainer. It's not just a training. I hope I'm a good trainer after all this time, but it's really all that resilience work that I put into place as well. The other thing I want to say, I'm just thinking about going back to what you were saying earlier, where owners want to like do something, guardians want to they're doing something. A lot of resilience work even looks into like, how do you break it down training a behavior? Like, how do you break down criteria?
Yeah.
Right. So if you're splitting criteria really, really finely to support the dog in learning what you want, and there's minimal, they have to be wrong a couple times or make the incorrect choice a couple times as part of the learning. It can't be like 100% going in that direction. But if most of it is, like the vast majority of it feels errorless in the way that we describe it, not in the way that it's described in labs. Apparently it's like two different conversations that's offline. But the way that the dog training community defines errorless learning, it's not about never making errors. It's about setting up the criteria and the environment in such a way that there's very few errors as possible, so the dog is like mostly right. When you train that way, you are building the nervous system in a more supportive way. So like, you're not wiring in frustration, you're not wiring in anxiety, right? And all of that can evolve into significant issues. Like if you step into the ring when you're doing dog sports, things like that, that level of confusion, like if it's always been going on and they were raised that way, you will see a different kind of performance in the ring. And it's a complex conversation. I know I'm like we're getting to the end and I'm bringing up this big point, but a lot of times I'll say, hey, the way we're going to train is like break it down really simple so that the dog can be right the majority of the time. And that is also about resilience right there, building resilience.
Right. So the way in which we train, which is doing something, is part of that framework that builds resilience. Yeah, no, I totally get that. That's amazing. So we could probably carry on talking for hours, but I know that you have an appointment to get to. But tell everybody where they can find you, how they can learn about all this amazing framework that you've built, and just where people can find you.
Thank you. So my business name is Dogology Behavior Consulting. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and I have a website. I imagine it'll be in the show notes, so you guys can find me there. Yep. I'm actually speaking at the Aggression in Dogs conference at the end of September. So they still have virtual tickets. I think there might be some in-person tickets left as well. And then I'm speaking at the Clicker Expo in March in New York next year. I don't believe tickets have gone on sale yet, but you guys can we'll put all the links in the show notes. Yep. And then I'm doing some other things. Kathy and I are doing Reframing Resilience for the Sport Dog. We're doing a seminar, an online seminar, I believe in the beginning of November, so in 2 months, on our friends platform called Brain Camp Flicks. So it's all neuroscience, dog sports, and behavior. It's very fun. And then if people want to learn more about our framework, we wrote an article, a publication, I think in 2023. Yeah, so 2 years ago, called The Resilience Rainbow, and it can be found on IAABC, so IAABC Foundation Journal. It's online. And then what we have going on now is we are working on a course for professionals, and it's called Reframing Resilience. And you guys can visit our website, reframedog.com, and sign up for alerts and things. And we'll be, keeping in touch and letting you guys know what's going on in the status of things.
Amazing. That sounds so cool.
A lot.
Lots and lots to do. So before we sign off, I want to ask you how your book is going, because I need you to tell everybody about this book, because I am literally, so I tried to do the pre-purchase, but I don't have a Kindle, so I'm going to have to wait until the book actually is out.
You're so sweet.
But please, I need to know more. Like when I read about the characters, I was just like, oh my God, it's blowing my brain. So just in the last minute or two, quickly tell us about that.
So funny. I like totally did not expect this. So I just got, I don't know, like a year ago, I guess it was like December last year, I was going through a lot of loss. Like the company I worked for closed. There was a lot of things happening. My mother-in-law passed away in February last year, and last year was really hard for my husband's family and managing all of that. And so my dog passed away in October. There was like a lot of loss happening. A friend of mine, you know, we weren't getting on anymore. We're good now. But all of that loss, and then I think I was processing a lot of stuff before that because I just had a lot of quiet time all of a sudden, and it turned into a lot of journal exercises, and then I felt like, what if I could I wanted to get my power back, you know, or like, what if I can control an outcome? Like, what if it was like this, or what if it was like that? And then suddenly it was turning into a book. And I love the genre romantasy. So it's like romance and fantasy, because the female main characters can tend to be like total badasses. Sorry, can I say that? Like they're like a heroine that is not a damsel in distress, right? Mm-hmm. And so and there's always like some really sexy guy that's like,
I mean,
you know, yeah, that's part of the story. But the point is it's a way to like get your power back. So I wrote this book. It's turning into a 5-book series. And now I was going to go traditional publishing, but now I'm an indie author because I just got too impatient, and I do better like with my own creative expression and not having to like have someone else tell me how to do things. But yeah, it's going to be released on February 9th, 2026. The first book is called Elemental Awakening. It's book 1 of the Echoes of Lemuria series. And yeah, I have got an amazing team of people that are helping me promote it. And I've met some wonderful readers in the community and indie authors that have been fantastic. And so, yeah, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok, Bobbie Workma, WIRKMAA_author. Workma is my husband's name. So I wanted to have some sort of differentiation. So people are like, wait, I thought I was looking for the dog trainer. And then they see like a romance scene. So I had to make it. I was like, that would be confusing. Or vice versa.
I literally can't wait to read this book. Like when I read through, like I say, the description of like the characters or some of the story elements and some of the like touch her and you die energy, I was just like, oh my God, I need this book in my life.
I will send you the manuscript, girlfriend.
Oh, yay.
You're going to get it in advance.
That's so cool. Amazing. So yeah, that's another little string to your bow, or quite a big string to your bow. Yeah. So yeah, I want to make sure you got an opportunity to say that.
Thank you.
I love it so much. Yeah.
We'll put that link in there too. I have a website.
I will do that. Absolutely. All right. So on that happy note, we're going to wrap things up. So that was Resilience/Romantasy.
R&R.
Exactly.
Little R&R time, Resilience and Romantasy.
Yeah. So it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I think this is going to be such a valuable episode. I'm actually going to dive into the reframing resilience myself, because I think you can never learn enough. And it's just such a great topic. And it fits, I think, so perfectly with like a veterinary behaviorist as well, especially one that doesn't have a lot of, I guess, trainers around. I know that we collaborate on a few cases, but yeah, it's going to be, I think it's such a helpful way. It's like an add-on to I think what we do. So thank you. And yeah, have a lovely remainder of your day. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I love this. Thank you.
Good. And to everyone else, I will see you next week for episode 102. Bye for now.